I love movies. I mean, I don't think there's anything better than just, on like a Saturday night, sitting down on the couch with my wife, with my kids, popping a bunch of popcorn, putting in a great movie where you just get caught up in the story, and it's got the special effects, and you're on the edge of your seat, and you're really into it. It's a great way to spend a couple hours. I love it. The other day, in fact, it was this past Saturday, I found myself sitting around at home, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to turn on Netflix. So I started scrolling through Netflix, and I came across a movie I haven't seen in a few years. It's been a little while. It's Apollo 13. Now, I like that movie. I like it because it's got some action. It's got, a little bit of mystery, like what happened, why are they stranded, that kind of stuff, and why did that happen. You've got the whole question of, are they going to make it? Are they going to survive through this trip? Now, this time, when I was watching it, I had some different thoughts go through my mind. A little bit unusual for me. So, in the story, you got these three guys. All right, they're training. They're astronauts. They're training to go up on Apollo 13, and they know each other so well because they've been training so long. They can anticipate each other's moves, and they know how each other is going to react to things. They know, hey, you got this, so I got this, and they just really gel. They're a team. They're a unit. And 2 days before launch, the main pilot gets sidelined. You see, the medical staff had run some blood tests, and they found that he had an illness. I think it was like the measles or something like that. But the medical staff were telling Tom Hanks' character, they were telling him that if you guys go up right now with this pilot, if you guys go up there, by the time you're done with your moon landing and you're ready to turn around and come back home, he's going to be so sick he won't be able to fly. And yet, you're in outer space. There's no other options. So if your pilot gets sick, you're done. Who's going to fly the craft? Who's going to get you home safely? So he gets sidelined 2 days before launch. They call in the backup. They do some practice with the backup, and then they take off and they go on this mission. Now, on the mission, it doesn't go as planned. Stuff hits the fan. An oxygen tank had some kind of a faulty coil, and it ended up blowing up. So they have a broken ship, and they're not sure if they can make it home. So after a lot of stuff happens, one of the things that comes up is that they have the computer turned off because they don't want to waste the batteries. See, you only have so much power in the spaceship. And so they didn't turn off just the computer, but they turned off basically everything. But in order to get home, you have to turn it back on. And when you first power it up, it takes so much juice, so much amperage, that it'll blow out the batteries based on the amount of power that they have left. So they got to figure out, Houston, ground control, they have to figure out, how do we get these guys home safely? How do we get the ship turned on so they can bring them home? Well, what do? They called the guy that got sidelined. The pilot. He knows it the best. He's been in training with them. He knows exactly what they have. He knows how it works. And it's basically his equivalent that has to do all this stuff. So they need him to figure out, how do we get this ship up and running? Now, when they were training, the last thing that this guy would have expected was to get sidelined for medical. But it happened. You see, he had this expectation of going to space and delivering these guys to the moon. But just like that, his expectations blown out of the water. His whole life, his whole career changed in that moment. And yet, if that didn't happen, he never would have gotten the power up on the ship. Because it took him a couple of days and probably hundreds of tries in order to get the exact right sequence, the right combination of things in order to be able to power up the ship. And he was the only one that could do it. Everybody else didn't have any ideas on how to do it. And he was the one that rescued them. That showed them how to get it powered up so they could land. And if he had been on the ship, he would have had one shot. And it took him hundreds of tries. So had his expectations been met, he would have died, as well as the other two guys on the ship. So you're probably wondering, what does it have to do with coincidence? What does it have to do with kind of the theme of this channel? And let me tell you, it's the Easter season. This past Sunday was Palm Sunday. This coming Sunday is Easter. And after I thought about, this guy's expectations through the movie and how he got sidelined, he was crushed. I mean, it just completely didn't meet his expectations. He left. He turned off the TV, unplugged his phone, and just disconnected from everything. He rejected everything around him. Now, the same thing happened with the Jews. You see, the Old Testament has a lot of prophecy in it. The whole Bible does. But the Old Testament has a lot of prophecy about the coming of the Messiah. And it talks about two different comings, really. We know that now because we've already lived through the first one, right? The first one was when Jesus came and died on the cross. The second coming is when, he's going to take us all home and, judgment and all that kind of stuff. But you see, in the Old Testament, it wasn't really distinguished between the two. So we didn't know that. What we knew, we as in the human race, what we knew was that the Messiah was going to come. And so the expectations were that he was going to come as a conquering king. He was going to come in, and the Jews during Jesus' day, at that time period, they expected the Messiah to come in and to overthrow the Roman government. They wanted him and expected him to really be kind of a militaristic ruler, and to like I said, overthrow the Romans and establish Israel and Jerusalem as the dominant state, dominant city in the world, and to really kind of essentially rule the world. And Jesus came with a very different mission. And the Jews' expectations were shattered, just like that. Just like the expectations of Pilate in Apollo 13. But, just like in the story of the movie, if it didn't happen that way, we would all be dead. Because you see, Jesus didn't come in as a militaristic, take over the world king. No. He came as a lamb led to slaughter. He came as a sacrifice. And it's because he had the bigger picture in mind. God had the bigger picture for us in mind. You see, he didn't meet our expectations because our expectations were wrong. Our expectations were selfish in a lot of ways. Now, you might be wondering, well, if that's prophecy, then why would that make our expectations wrong? And really quickly, just to address that, the reason is because our expectations were more about the second coming and not the first coming. And so, God's plan was first to give us a path, to bridge the gap between God and man. And Jesus is that bridge. And without his sacrifice, if he did come in as that conquering king that we all expected, we would all be damned to hell. Because there would have never have been an atoning sacrifice for our sin to reconcile us to God. So because God, and through Jesus, had that bigger plan in mind, we're able to call him Father. We're able to pray. See, even before Jesus died, we couldn't even pray to God, really, because, it was that separation. You could technically pray, yes, but there was always that separation of sin. And even in the temple, there was the curtain that was that separation. But when he died, there was no more separation. That's why we can go directly to God. We don't have to go through a priest or anything like that. We can right now talk to God because Jesus died for our sin. Because our expectations were not met. Because God had something so much greater than any expectation we could dream of. We are now able to go to the Creator of the universe. Each of us individually or collectively as a group, we can pray. We can talk to God. We can read His Word because of that sacrifice, because of the bigger picture instead of just meeting our expectations. So then it begs to the question of, what are your expectations of God? If it's not what's written in His Word, I want to think about that. But also think about, what is God's expectation for us? Because He talks about that. As people, as Christians, as believers and followers of Him, we have expectations that we need to meet. Now, we will never, ever, because we have a sinful nature, we will never meet it. But we're expected to try. We're expected to love God. We're expected to love others. That's really what it all hangs on. So, in this Easter season, think about it. Think about expectations. Think about where you're at, what your expectations for God are, and are they really realistic? Are they consistent with what His Word says, or are they selfish? What's the reason for your expectations? What's the bigger picture? And also think about God's expectations for you. And what are you doing to meet